This is Gemara Bab Metziah, Daf Kof Dalid, and today's Shir, Hey Sivan, Erev Shvuos, has been sponsored by a close friend of the Daf, as Aschos Alias Neshama of Israel Meir ben Tzvi Levi, whose first yard site was yesterday, the Daf for Dalid Sivan, Siyat Shemaya, as we are walking into Kabbalah Satira, the Schos HaSibor, the Schos HaTaira, should elevate the neshama of Israel Meir ben Tzvi Levi higher and higher in Gan Eden Shalmaila, closer to the Kisai HaKavod. We pick it up on the bottom of Kuf Gimel Amid Beis at the Mishnah. Teaches the Mishnah Mekabel Sadeh Michaveroi. Someone leases a field from his friend. V'hi Beis HaShlachin Oy Beis HaIlon. Two different types of fields. Either it's a Beis HaShlachin, which Rashi 6 lines at the bottom speaks out is Karka Yevesha, Tlodaya B'Migishamim B'Mayin Shabbat Mashkenaisa. A Beis HaShlachin is a field that does not subsist on rainwater and rather requires external waters to water it. Oy Beis HaIlon, and therefore Rashi explains, and because of the Elon is Chaviv al-Aris, that he wants a chelik in the peiros. So says the Mishnah, someone leases one of two fields. If Yavish HaMayan, if the Mayan, the irrigational stream running through the field that waters the Beis HaShlachin, dries up, V'nixas Elon, or the tree that the owner particularly wanted the fruits fell down, he cannot deduct from his rent, even though he's clearly losing. He can't deduct anything from his rent. Im Amar Loi. However, if he said to him, Chakar li sadeh, Beis HaShlachim zu, or he saw the Beis HaIlon zeh, he specified that he wants this Beis HaShlachim or this Beis HaIlon, then Yavish HaMayim Nixas HaIlon, then what's the halacha? Minach Eloi min chachuroi. Then he could indeed deduct from the rental to compensate for the loss. So two halves of the Mishnah. The Mishnah began teaching us that in as much as a Beis HaShlachin needs the irrigational canal, the Beis HaIlon, the tree is desirous. If the canal or the tree is no longer, still the renter, the leaser, pays the full amount. However, if he specified that I want this Beis HaShlachim or this Beis HaIlon, then the halacha is different, and then indeed he's able to subtract from that which he pays if the irrigational canal dries up or the tree falls. Says the Gemara, Hechi Dami, what is the case of this Mishnah? Ile Madiyavish Nahara. If the Mishnah is that if the case is not just that this irrigational canal dried up, but the main river dried up, Nahar Rabbah, why can you not subtract Nemalei, let the renter say, Makas Medina, it's a Makas Medina. And we're going to learn in a few days that if you accept a field and then there's a locust or a windblown storm, the halacha is you can indeed subtract from the rental. So says the Gemara, Amar Baba, what's the case of the Mishnah? The Avish Naharazuta, a small river dried up. Damar Lei, the owner can tell the renter as we turn over to Kuf Dalet Amid Aleph. Okay, the river dried up, but go get a pail, and you can water your field with the pail, and therefore he cannot subtract from his rental. Amar Rabba continues Rabba, and he says, Hani tarti masnita kamaisa. The first two mishnahs in this parak, Meshachas La, bein b'chachranusa, bein bekablanusa. Both tenant farmers, sharecroppers, mikan ve'elach, the isa bekablanusa, lesa b'chakranusa. The isa b'chakranusa, lesa bekablanusa. So Rabba lays the framework that in the beginning of this parak it was interchangeable. The particular arrangement between, we'll call the tenant, the one that is leasing the field, and the owner. However, henceforth, it's going to be particular whether we're dealing with chakiros or kablanos, which will, as we go along, get a better feel of what the precise halachas are. Says the Gemara. So the Mishnah continued, and the Mishnah said that if he said zeh, then that's a different story. Asks the Gemara, Vamai, what's the reason if you said zeh? All of a sudden, if the item's not there, if the irrigational canal is not there, if the tree is not there, you can yes deduct from this chiros. Amai leimalei. Let him say Shema ba'alma amri lecha, that I'm selling you merely the name, meaning I didn't mean mamish zeh. I meant a beis hashlachim. I meant a field tree with a field of a tree, but I wasn't being particular. The Gemara proves this. Miloi Tanya, do we not learn in the Raisa? There's not a full base or still a tigiu. It's a good sale. Why? Vodemikari base core, as long as it's called a base core, even though it doesn't really have a base core. Similarly, I'm telling you a vineyard. Aval bi shema gefanim, there are no grapes, vines, grapes. Higi, it's a good sale. Shema. But again, Udemitzkari karma, as we call the vineyard. Pardes, an orchard, there's no pomegranates. Higi, it's a good sale. Why? Shema. So says the Gemara, what do we see from this brisa? Alma, Amar Leishma Ba'alma Amri Lecha. I'm telling you just the name. Hachanami name Leishma Ba'alma Amri Lecha. I'm just telling you the name, meaning not bedavka, this irrigational field, not bedavka, this tree. Amar Shmuel like Kasha. Which I'm sure, as we read the Gemara, might have been frustrating, because when we explained the Mishnah, it sounded like the renter is talking. When we explained the Gemara, it sounded like the owner is talking. So what's going on over here? Says Shmuel, that's the Teretz. Who is the one talking? When the owner says, I'm going to sell you Beis Hashlachim Zeh, Beis Elin Zeh, then Shema Ba'alma Amrlei, just selling him the name, it doesn't mean bedavka. Amrlei Chaycher Lemachkir Kepeda, he's spelling it out particularly because he is makbid. Teretz number 1 of Shmuel. Teretz number 2 of Ravina Amar, 4 lines from the Mishnah. ID says Ravina Damle Machkir Lechaycher. The owner is talking in both cases. But in our Mishnah, you're standing next to it. So if he's standing next to it, why did he have to say not only Zeh, but Beis Hashlachim Zeh? Lemeimar, that comes to bring out the Kamer Le Beis Hashlachim Kedekaimi Hashta, honing in on the status that it is in right now. That is the reason why the Kedekaimi Hashta, the status that it is in, the status that it's right now, meaning with the irrigational field, with the tree, and that's the reason why you deduct if the tree is no longer or the irrigational canal is no longer. We continue with the Mishnah smack in the middle of Kuf Daled Amud Aleph. So he leases a field from his friend and didn't plant on it. You evaluate how much does it normally produce, and you have to give that amount to the owner. Again, these are arrangements in which the renter keeps a part and the owner gets a part. So if the renter didn't do his own by working the field, he still has to pay his share. That's what they write in the contract that what? If you leave it fallow and do not work it, so you'll have to pay with the best. Says the Gemara, Rameir hayodayreish lashon hedit. Rameir would explain the way that people talk. Titania, we learned in a brisa. Rabbi Meir, says Rameir, if someone says, I did not work the field, I left the fallow, I'll pay the best. This is how people normally write it. Says Rameir, therefore, you have to compensate if you left the field unplanted. Rav Yehuda Yidar Shoshan Hadiyat Titania. Rav Yehuda Imer Adam Mevi Carbon Asher Alishtai. Chen Kol Carbon V'Kamen Shechayaves. Why? Shekakasav Lo Yachrayis Tislacholai. That's why he writes Achayis mean Kadam Ta Dina from the time prior. Mikadam Ta Dina. So says the Gemara. So Rav Yehuda similarly, he's not commenting on our case, but we're bringing down Rav Yehuda because in a similar vein, Rav Yehuda is showing us that we go by Lashon Hadiyat the way that people talk. And a third example is Hillel HaZakein, Hayadarish Lashon Hadiyat Titania, Anshe Alexandria, Hayamakdishan Narseim. They would get married to B'Shaskin Isasan. At the time they would go to the Chuppah Boin Acherim, V'chaitu Naisan. Other people would come and grab the woman and marry them, Mehen. The Chazal wanted to say that they're mamzerim, these were married women. So Amar Len Hillel HaZakein, if you look subas imelchem, bring me the ksuba of their mothers. If you look subas imat, umatza, they know these right in Alexandria, shekasa bahem, lechisha tichnasim, lechop avlele, into when we go to the chuppah, we should be for a wife. And therefore, because they did not yet go to the chuppah, they would grab them beforehand. They did not make their children mamzerim. And a fourth example, 7 lines to the bottom, Rav Yehuda ben Karchai Darish Lashon Hadiyat Tanya. Rav Yehuda ben Karchai Meramal V'Schaver Leim Shechenu Yoiser Mechayvai. If someone lends someone else money, he cannot take a mashkin more than the value of the chayv. Why? Excuse me. The payments that you have over me, kol kabel dichi, are equal to the value of this mashkin. Says the Gemara, time of the cost of lehachi. Sounds like the only reason why they're particular that the mashkin is of such a value is because they wrote this in the shtar, which would indicate if they did not, they didn't write this loikanya. But is that true? Says Rav Yechon, what happens if someone takes a mashkin and returns the mashkin umes and the borrower died? We take it away from the children. We take the mashkin back. So what do we see? Even without a document, the lender has the ability to get back the mashkin in a time when such is appropriate. Answers the Gemara, so what the hell bringing it in? For the depreciation of the security. And a fifth and final example of Lashon Hedi that Chazal Darshan in the top line on Kovdalim Bebeis Rav Yossi Darish Lashon Hedi. The Tanya learned in a brayso. Rabbi Yossi Aimer Mokim Shenagu Lasik Suba Milveh Koive Milva, in a place where they were accustomed to make the dowry of the ksuba into a loan that the husband obligated and said he is chayev to give the value that is written down in the event that he divorces his wife, in the event that he dies. The halacha is goive milva. The husband could collect the value like a loan for the father-in-law. Lichbol, in a place where the custom is to write double the value. Goive mechsa. Then the husband could only collect half because he only obligated himself in such. He wrote double because that was the minhag. Says the Gemara, Nahar Bloi Govu Tulsa. They would collect a third because they would write 3 times the amount inside the ksuba. Continues the Gemara, Merimar Magvinami Shevcha. 5 lines down, Merimar would collect the shevach. Ask the Gemara, Amli Ravina La Meimar Vatanya Lechbol Goiva Mechsa. So how you learn them even to collect the shevach, the improvements? Like Kasha, Hadikaminei, says the Gemara, Hadalokani mine. It's totally whether there was a kinyan or not. Ravina, in a similar story, Mishvach Vikasev Levrate. Ravina exaggerated the amount and wrote a higher amount for his daughter. Amrulei Nikni mine. They said, Ravina, let's make a kinyan. Demar Amr Lahu, Ravina said, Imikne loy mechbal, imechbal loy migna. If we make a kinyan, then it won't be doubled. If we don't make a kinyan, it'll be doubled. I mean, the text will be double the value, proving the point that we just said, that they would often write down an exaggerated larger amount in the ksuba, but if they actually made a kinyan, it would go by the lower amount. 12 lines down, the first line is Aho Gavram. Damar lehu. There was a person who said to someone else, Havli Abba Me'ez use the vrati b'ksuba asa. Give 400 zuz to my daughter for her ksuba. Sholach Rav Acha Brei, der Rav Avia lekamei, der Rav Ashi, Arba Mea dinon, Tamni Mea, Oy Abba Mea zuzi dinon motayim. What did he mean when he said 400? Did he mean that they wrote down in the ksuba 800, so you said 400? Or do you mean write 400, which means you only have to send 200, going with the aforementioned numbers that double was written? Amar Rav Ashi, says Rav Ashi Chazina. We look, says Rav Ashi. If we see the father says, Amar Havalu, give her, then means you should give her 400, which is written as 800. Whereas if he said, write it down for her, if you saw him to write it down, they don't have to pay right now. That meant that he's showing that they should write down 400 in as much as the original pledge was only half of that, 200. Another lashon 20 lines down. Rav Ashi Chazinan. That means it was really 800. Means it was recorded as 200. It says the Gemara, all of this. Whether they said liksubasa, whether they said big subasa for ksuba, or actually to make the dowry for ksuba, the halacha is Aramei Azuzi Dinan Matayin Adam Lehu. Excuse me. One second. It's 400, which is 200. Unless he says, give her a stam, then it's going to be the full amount. If not, it's going to actually be half of the amount. Hahu Gavra. 13 lines from the wide lines. First one line is Hahu Gavra. The couple Aramei Chavrei. He accepted a field from a friend, and again, he's going to work the field and get a percentage. Omar, he said, if I leave the field, I'm going to give you 1,000. Oiver tilsa. So that he left 1/3 of the field fallow. Amrin hadai dinu diav leho. 333, because he said if the whole thing is not planted, I'll give 1,000. He didn't plant one area, he gives 333. Rava Amar says, Rava, you don't have to give anything. It was an asmachta, it was an reliance, and such is not considered a kinyan. Says the Gemara, the Rava that says no kinyan, Mishnah about the 10 houses is different than the Mishnah, which says if I'm not going to work the field, I'm going to pay the best. So what do we see? We see that you actually have to. Hasam like a gazim. Give them a milsa. You see, says the Gemara, take a gazim. Be'etzim, you're right, says the Gemara. But from his words, it's clear that it's a guzma. Therefore, you don't have to. One last story. It was a person who accepted to lease a field for sesame. Zarachiti, and instead he planted wheat. Of the chiti kishomshimi. The field produced wheat as much as sesame. So Savar Rav Kahana on the last narrow line, you ruined the field, so you have to deduct that amount. Amar le Rav Ashi, says Rav Ashi, Rav Kahana Amri Enshi, people are going to say, let the field be depleted, but not the owner, meaning he's happy that it grew more, and therefore the owner gets the same share like he would have gotten. He does not get any less because he's very happy that his field produced more wheat, equaling the value of the sesame. We'll stop over here. We'll pick it up from here. B'siyata Dishmaya.